Hello and welcome to Property Potential Podcast. I'm your host, Robert Zalkin. Today it's an honor to be with Jay Lucas. Jay is the CEO of Lucas Group. He's also author of American Sunshine and a host of other wonderful things. I'm really excited to have Jay on today. Jay, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yes, absolutely. So, Jay, let's start with your background. Tell us a little bit about um, you know growing up and kind of paint a picture of how you got to where you are today.
Sure, that's wonderful. Well, I think the first thing people might like to know is that I grew up in a small town up in New Hampshire. Not everybody's been to New Hampshire, but a great place. And subsequently, after leaving, I went to school, college, business school. And I think probably the a couple of formative things about me as I was growing up is that I did grow up in this really small, idyllic town called Newport, New Hampshire, and played all the sports in high school. Went to the public high school, got a scholarship, made my way to Yale, which was a pretty big deal for me coming from a small town. It was really wonderful, and um, and then off to business school. But while I was at Yale, I think one of the most helpful things in my development really was that I was interested in history. I was interested in government and politics, and there was an opportunity to run for state office. While I was still in college, I ran for the New Hampshire House of Representatives, the state legislature. And although I was only 19 when I ran, I won. and not only won, but I got to serve on the House Judiciary Committee. I won re-election, so I served for 4 years total. And that was just such a great developmental moment in my life to really understand, much about that political process. Graduated, went off to business school. I did law school, graduated from Harvard, and started my career. And my business career, which was straight to a firm located in Boston called Bain, Bain. And some people have now heard of it, Bain or Bain Capital. But it was really a fun, wonderful place to be because working on really important business issues, strategy, consulting for growing companies, and got to know quite a bit about business in that process. Got to meet some phenomenal people, and the firm did very, very well. And the firm grew enormously. And as it grew and it got to be so much larger, I was there almost 10 years as a partner. Um, I decided I just kind of knew myself, and I knew that being part of a huge organization was becoming a large organization was great, but it was probably not for me or long term. I couldn't really see myself spending another 20 years there. And so being more entrepreneurial, I decided to start my own firm. So I founded the Lucas Group, and grown that. I think of it almost like a mini Bain, if you will. Grew it to about 35 people doing strategy and private equity work, basically investing in growing companies, just trying to build companies, create jobs, help entrepreneurs, really. And I've done that for many, many years. And along the way, I did have one more experience in politics, if you will. I did run for governor up in New Hampshire in 1998. I did win a very hard-fought primary campaign. I lost in the general election, but it was also one of those formative experiences. And even though I had lost, I learned a lot, and it was enormously fun. Absolutely, just a total blast. And but having come out of that, I saw a couple things. One is I saw just how inefficient so much of government is, so much of state government. So created a practice within our consulting firm to help state governments become much more efficient, to apply business principles, if you will, in a different way, but to make them more efficient. Did that in a number of states, working with governors across the country, in Missouri and Pennsylvania, Florida, Texas, beyond. And and then what I've been doing most recently are two things, a couple things. One is much of my experience over the years has been in the consumer sector. I'll tell you a little bit more about that maybe in a minute, about what we're doing, building brands in several sectors within consumer. And then also have gotten very involved in veterans organizations, acquired a company called Flags of Valor, invested in Flags of Valor, a veteran-owned company, veteran-founded company, where we make wooden painted American flags for anybody, but made by veterans. And just great products. Also, kids flag building kits as well. And the last thing I'll mention is that also I've been very involved in what you described earlier, Robert, which is the Sunshine Initiative, where we're revitalizing small towns, starting with my hometown in Newport, New Hampshire. But maybe I'll just sort of stop there, and that's quite a bit. I usually don't talk this much about myself, but it was fun to have this opportunity.
Well, you definitely said a lot, and I think it's hard to kind of talk about everything. But let's unpack a few things that you mentioned. Um, you know, Interested in learning a little bit more about what you're doing with brands at the Lucas Group, and if that some of that is sort of a continuation on work or businesses that you had worked on at Bain. Is there, one or two examples that you can give on maybe a project at Bain, or maybe something currently that you're working on? It sounds like the flag project is certainly near and dear to the heart, but love to maybe go inside your mind a little bit and hear how you look at brands and what makes a brand and the importance of brands in our lives.
Absolutely. This is really a love of mine, our brands and helping entrepreneurs. And the way this developed, you're absolutely right. It started from a consulting project, if you will, where we were doing work as a due diligence assignment on a contract lab manufacturing business that fills a filler for hair care, skincare products. And so not a very, kind of a down and dirty business, but I'll never forget the numbers. Uh, the business was doing about $35 million in revenues, and it was doing almost $10 million in profit in EBITDA. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's an awful lot of profit. And now what? And it just made bells go off for me. And I thought, well, what's going on here? There's really something going on in that. Maybe it's in this industry, in this sort of beauty industry. So what I did is I got a team to work with me from the Yale Business School. And I said, we're going to run this like a Bain team. And we're going to figure out what's going on in this beauty, wellness, personal care industry that makes it so profitable that a down and dirty manufacturer can make this much money. What's the most profitable place to be here? So we tore it all apart, and the answer may not surprise you, but it turns out that it's brands. Brands in that space. Manufacturers are great and fillers, but brands end up with most of the value. And what we also learned was that there's a particular stage of the brand's development that creates by far the most value. It's a really interesting little niche, and it is what we're doing now. What we learned was that if you can find a very distinct brand, so not a Me Too brand in any way, but a very distinct brand that is very small. It could be as small as $2 or $3 million in revenues, maybe up to 8 or 10, but in that range. And you find a product that's not only distinct, but you got repeat purchase happening. So it's growing quickly, but it's not a fad. You've got real loyalty. If you can find one of those, the entrepreneur is always very passionate, but they're lacking two things. Obviously, they're lacking capital to grow in most every case, but also probably even more important than that, they haven't done this before, so they're lacking the what I'll call the guidance, the mentorship, the experience of kind of a Bain-like value add team, an advisor to help them grow and help them scale. And so that's what we do. So we have created a team and a capital source called LB Equity, where we invest in these brands. We embrace the entrepreneurs with knowledge and experience, bring teamwork to the fore, and help them grow. And what we found, and why this is so interesting from a financial point of view, is that if you can take that brand, grow it to kind of a magic threshold around, you get to about $20 million in top line revenue. Suddenly, what happens is you become incredibly attractive as an acquisition target for the big guys. If it's beauty, it could be L'Oreal or Estee Lauder. If it's more personal care, maybe it's Unilever or P&G. But you see, those companies, those large companies, need to grow but they're so large and bureaucratic that they have an enormously tough time innovating. They'll kill any great idea right internally, and but they realize that, and so they grow by acquisition. And here's the special sauce: is that when they do these acquisitions, it's not based on a traditional multiple of EBITDA or profits. It's based on a multiple of revenues, and we've gone back on all the research, and typically they'll acquire these at 5 times the revenue, so 5 times $20 million or 5 times $30 million, and so you've created a lot of economic value. And so that's what we do at LB Equity. But there are two other what I call nuances that distinguish us beyond that. Um, One is we only invest in brands that are natural, so brands with natural ingredients, which is what we care about. It's also where the whole marketplace is going. That's what the large companies want. They've got plenty of chemically driven brands, but they need more natural for sure in the portfolios. And then the other thing, and this is really important to us, we always like to invest in what I call brands with a mission or brands with a purpose, but something that is beyond the economics, beyond the finances, something that really drives this team, that has some sort of positive, probably social impact, maybe broadly defined, sustainability, always throughout all of our brands. That's very important. But what we found, and I'll kind of end with this thought, is that um, it's kind of a win-win because we're doing something we care about, creating a good mission-driven, a good outcome. But what's interesting is that because these teams are so motivated by that, they also get better financial outcomes. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody. That you get the great financial outcomes and great value, and you're also doing something very good. So that's what we're doing at LBF.
That's incredible. How does the Sunshine Initiative tie into what you're doing, or is it a totally separate thing? And maybe even before we talk about that, maybe you can give our listeners some background on the Sunshine Initiative and how you got started and what the purpose is.
Yeah. So absolutely. Well, the Sunshine Initiative is really came as a result of growing up in Newport, New Hampshire. And as I began to mention earlier, Newport is this small town, western part of New Hampshire, 6,500 people population. And it's where I grew up from, went to school. And it's what I, growing up, what I really remember most is we had this main street that I call like a Norman Rockwell kind of main street, where you can probably picture it. It's got the pharmacy, so you get the drugstore, you get the hardware store, the jewelry store, the shoe store, and if I walked into any of those as a kid, they would know me. I know their families. It just had this really great feeling to it. So it's kind of an idyllic kind of childhood, and being in the Newport High School, playing all the sports, and just being part of the community. That's what I remember. And however, after I graduated from high school, the mill in town, closed down. There was unemployment. Um, the economy not only went down, but we're not near geographically, we're not near an interstate highway, so you can imagine how that would impact the local economy. Um, and so years go by, and I had gone up there, gone to Newport a number of times, and always would revisit. But one particular time, a little more than 5 years ago, my wife and I were driving down the main street, so Karen and I, and I was looking at those same beautiful storefronts, that Norman Rockwell environment, and it looked entirely different. They were either boarded up or closed down, or in some cases secondhand stores. But you could literally tell that the life had been sapped out of that town. And it just hit us, and we said, we're going to change all this. We're going to revitalize Newport, New Hampshire, having no idea how to do this. Okay, we had no idea. But we said we're going to make it happen. A can-do spirit, positive spirit. We're going to make this happen. So what I'm incredibly happy to be able to say is that here we are, more than 5 years later, and we're 95% the way back. What started with just the two of us. Now we've got more than 100 volunteers. It's the sunshine. We call it the Sunshine Initiative because Newport has a nickname. It's known as the Sunshine Town. We not only have activity going, but we brought in there are more than 100 new jobs since we started in town. There's housing being developed. What's really cool is that there's an opera house right in the middle of the main street. And this opera house was built in 1886. So you can imagine a beautiful, iconic building. And when it was built, it was literally known as the best theater north of Boston. But of course, over the years, kind of deteriorates, and so we came back in, and we've now invested over $1.5 million into its renovation. It is back, so they've got the opera house with concerts and theater and things happening there. We got a robotics program into the high school. We even got a dog park being built on the edge of town. So you can kind of, and much of this is around a can-do, positive spirit that just change. Once you start believing and start seeing some proof, what we found is virtually everybody really they're proud of their town. They want to be part of something. But if it's just them, it's very hard just as one person to say, what am I going to do? But if you can be part of a movement, part of an initiative like this, you can make all the difference.
It's absolutely incredible that you were able to turn around an entire small town. I mean, there's countless number of small towns throughout this country that are near and dear to so many people. But to be able to say that you were, part of that turnaround story is truly amazing. Were there any programs or things that you helped implement that got the entire community involved?
Well, many, 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 many. But I think probably one of the most important things we did in terms of community involvement was it happened a couple of years into it, and a moment I thought, I've got to do something here that'll kind of brand the town or give us something distinctive, kind of an event. And we came up with this idea that if we're the Sunshine Town, well, let's do something with flowers, and that'll get the kind of distinctive. And then somebody said, well, why not sunflowers? So we said sunflowers it is. So in April of that year, the Sunshine Initiative sent out 2,000 packets of sunflower seeds with instructions on how to plant to every business and every home in town. And so sunflowers started popping up all over Newport, New Hampshire. And in the summertime, people were taking pictures, Instagram photos. We've got kids for their school projects, all about sunflowers for the library. And what happened is that somebody said, curiously, what's the world record for the most sunflowers in a town? And of course, we didn't know, so we said, it's a great question. So we called Guinness. And Guinness sort of had the same reaction. They go, well, that's a great question. Let's look it up. And what they found is that there was no record. They said, hey, we don't have a record. And we said, that's fantastic. We're going to set the record. So what happened? So from there, what I so vividly recall is on the first Saturday in September. And if you've been to New Hampshire, New England, and you know that crisp Saturday morning where there's not a cloud in the sky and the sky's a certain kind of shade of blue, we had 500 people down on our town common, all with their sunflowers to be judged. Guinness sent a judge up in a beautiful British outfit, as only Guinness can do. We had an official count. And he proclaimed from our gazebo, Newport is officially amazing. You are world record holders. And so what that did, it was so remarkable. The spirit was awesome. And people who had, they woke up, they're simply a resident of Newport, New Hampshire on that Saturday morning. And this happens at 11 o'clock in the morning. By 11 o'clock, they're world record holders. Everybody got a certificate and everybody felt really proud. So much so, and this is what, I probably remember more than anything, is that by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I looked around and nobody had left that town common. There was a buzz. And so sometimes you feel like there's a spirit around you. And it certainly felt that way on that beautiful Saturday. It was just really awesome.
That's incredible. So what is the future for Sunshine Initiative? Are you looking to do more of these small towns throughout the country, or what is your vision for the initiative?
Well, in the process, we've learned, I think, a number of things that really do work, and it has been successful. And I do want to emphasize that it's certainly not just me, and it's not just me and my wife. It's the community has done this, and so we share credit broadly. But the Sunshine Initiative has been very successful, and in that process, word has gotten out that we have. And what started really with a desire on our part to help my hometown, because my friends grew up there, most still live there, and the opportunities that we had growing up aren't there, haven't been there for this next generation. We want to make sure that their kids and their grandkids have these opportunities. So that was the motivation in the beginning. But
Hmm.
what has happened is that because we've been successful, other towns have reached out to us. In fact, last year, 4 other towns in New Hampshire reached out, all old mill towns, and said, "Could you replicate that in our town?" So we're doing that in Claremont, in Rochester, in the west side of Manchester, in Laconia, all these towns where we got Sunshine Initiative efforts going on. And what's occurred to us in this process is that as you look across America, the idea of towns that have where they've seen manufacturing go offshore, they've seen the Amazon effect, they're not what they used to be, and
Right.
they're these towns that have been suffering. Well, and there are towns like this in Pennsylvania, in Ohio, in Texas, and Arizona, everywhere. They're everywhere. So our aspiration is to get to. It's going to sound like a big number, but I think it's very important. 1,000 towns.
Wow.
So in a country that has become politically divided and there's divisiveness and so forth, we're just taking a non-political approach and said we're going to fix this and do good things from the ground up. And so we're going to get to 1,000. And the last note on this is that we're not doing it by simply going from 4 towns or 5 towns to now 8 or 10 or 12. But instead, we're taking the lessons, the best practices that we've been able to distill and creating a platform, really, a scalable platform that small towns around the country can plug into to get our best practices and be part of the Sunshine Initiative that we're actually beginning to refer to as the American Sunshine Movement. The American Sunshine Movement.
Share with us. Share with us one or two of those best practices. If you were to kind of give a first, speech to, a small town that reached out to you, what's a sneak preview as to what they would hear as to best practices?
Oh, there are several, but I divide this. I think of what are the keys to success into really 2 buckets. And one of those buckets I call the nuts and bolts. And the nuts and bolts are, very much like you'd imagine. But there's some things that you just have to have some skill sets in to be successful. And there are things like bringing in jobs or finding jobs, or whether that's could be virtual employment in that town, but it's kind of an economic driver. Also investing in education, and then probably the other thing that's absolutely critical would be Main Street revitalization, often bringing in the artist creative community as kind of a leading force in that. And then there's a crisis going on in virtually every part of the country in terms of affordable housing.
Right.
And so you can get the jobs, but you got to have the housing, but you got to have the housing to get the job. So there's a chicken and egg effect there. And so we have developed, I think, some pretty good expertise on how to finance some of those housing capabilities as well. But those are the really the core things that you've got to do. And we have tools that will allow people to do that much more efficiently than we had to kind of learn it on our own. Now we've got not only the how to, but some of the funding sources that can help people. But like I say, that's one bucket. The other bucket turns out to, by the way, you have to do this bucket no matter what. But the second bucket is maybe more important. And that has everything to do with what we call the positive energy. It's the can-do mentality. I liken it to a sports team who's been, maybe had like 40 consecutive losing seasons. It's hard to get up for that next game when you've lost 40 years in a
Right.
row. But if you can turn that around with maybe an event like our Sunflower Guinness Book of World Records or whatever it is for that particular town, the change in attitude means everything. Once you've done that, everything else is possible. And you get a few people with that momentum, and you get more people, and it builds upon itself. Those would be my biggest takeaways from what we've learned so far.
Do you think that's really insightful? Do you think the kind of work from anywhere, this post-COVID lifestyle of hybrid work, will help the resurgence of revitalizing small towns? do cities lose out on the revitalization of small towns, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the work virtually, work anywhere has been just a major positive impact because people are no longer necessarily chained to a particular location, and so they've got choices. And the more people I talk to, what I keep hearing is it doesn't matter what generation it is, but say a younger generation says, I really want to raise my family in a small town. I want to feel part of a community. I want to be in a safe place where I can have a great education for my kids and where I can do my work all day long. And when it's 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, I'm home. There's a huge,
Quality
and
of
I
life.
can spend time with my family.
Right.
So we see that. And by the way, it certainly has helped the Sunshine Initiative. That's been part of, I think a very nice trend that's been helpful with us. But I think it's going to be helpful to towns really around across the country for sure.
Um, if you could, go back and give yourself some words of wisdom when you were younger, or words of wisdom for anybody out there listening now that might be just wrapping up college or school, what would you like to share with them?
I think there are two things that I would share. One is the value of relationships. That it's a long life, and you really want to invest in other people, and you never really know what's going on in somebody else's life. So listen intently, empathize, take the long view. That every individual is a very precious uh, person who needs to be respected, and just kind of treat those relationships as some of the most important things you can possibly have. So that's certainly one. And looking back in my own experience, I know that there have been certain people in my life that has just been absolutely critical in my development, my progress, and I just appreciate the fact that they've taken time and interest in me. And I think if you do that for other people, it'll pay huge dividends not only to them but probably more to you in the long run because you develop as a result of it. And the other thing I'd say is that maintaining a positive mental attitude is everything. That having this belief in yourself, this belief that you can do things, the faith all along the way. There's something about positive energy that's incredibly contagious. It really is. It's really kind of funny, but it is. And there's something magic about it. And so that if you can, what I say, if you can generate and exude uh, the most positive, genuine energy, it's going to reverberate and it's going to come back to you, and you're going to accomplish things that you could only dream of. But that's what I would think of as my best two pieces of advice.
Going back to your first one, is there anybody that you can remember that I guess served as a mentor to you kind of in your, earlier years of, your career?
Yeah, and well, there are many. I'll mention one. Um, Growing up in this small town, there was one fellow in particular who was he was a lawyer, and what was wonderful about this family was that they were immigrants. They came from Greece. We have a fairly large Greek population in the town of Newport, and but the family was very focused on education, on family values, and so much so that a family of five five kids, I think it was, and various of those kids kind of put their own careers on the back burner and helped each other get through school. And so this one fellow, Harry Spanis was his name. Harry was able to get into Harvard, which was unheard of in those days for an immigrant family like from a small town up in New Hampshire. But they got him into Harvard, and they helped pay for his education, and he got into Harvard Law School. He set up a local law practice, and another brother made it to law school, and another one got a doctorate. And I mean, just a very accomplished group. But Harry became my mentor, and Harry got involved in politics. Harry became a state representative. He was the vice president of the New Hampshire State Senate, and back in 1976, he ran for governor, and he won his party's nomination. And I look back, and he is a was a figure that just had an enormous impact on me because he took an interest. I mean, close family friend. We'd spend time at their house, but he was always very generous and giving advice and always wanting to do what was going to be best for me. And I think that it's people like that and he unfortunately did pass away. But it hit me really hard because I just knew that he had given me such a great gift, and it gave me the inspiration to want to do the same thing for other people.
Was it something that kind of propelled you to pursue, politics in some degree? Do you have a role on that?
Well, I thank you. It's been a pleasure to be part of this conversation, Robert. I love what you're doing,
Thank
and
you so much, Jay.
we wish you the best. And as I always like to say, onward and upward. Life is a positive, wonderful experience.
Thank you so much, Jay. It was a real pleasure to have you on today's Property Potential podcast. Truly appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.